this video, we will try to discuss Revolt of 1857, very popular topic of your modern India. Revolt of 1857, very popular, and most of you would be familiar with this development called Revolt of 1857. So, in this video we will try to discuss or understand the causes of this revolt, and then how it was suppressed, and when it was suppressed it was considered as a failure, but we don't consider it as a failure. Why this revolt started? Most of the historians, they believe that the open racial superiority, and arrogance of British rule, so open racial superiority and arrogance of British rule, most of the historians, they believe this produced fear and outrage. And this revolt is known for what? Expression of this fear and outrage. So this fear and outrage found expression in this historic event of 1857 revolt. It is fine. So this is in general understanding of most of the historian. Okay. It is considered as the most formidable challenge, most formidable challenge, the British Empire had to face in India, most formidable challenge, and they were successful in suppressing. It was suppressed, but as I indicated, as a student of freedom movement, as a student of modern Indian history, you have to remember, as Bipin Chandra said about this revolt, that even in failure it served a grand purpose. Always remember this expression of Bipin Chandra regarding 1857 revolt. It was suppressed, but always remember that even in failure it served a grand purpose, and it was a source of inspiration for the national movement, freedom movement. It was a great source of inspiration for the national movement. So national movement of course achieved what this revolt could not achieve, but it always remained a source of inspiration. Well, just I wanted to introduce our revolt of 1857, and yes, it was suppressed. Yes, in that sense, in achieving its immediate objective, it failed, but you should never consider it as a failure. It always remained a source of inspiration. Is this fine? Now, for our examination point of view, we will try to divide this 1857 revolt into different areas, and we will try to understand, we will try to see how we can use this information for our examination. Because those stories about 1857 revolt, you would be knowing it. So, I am trying to organize that for your examination purpose. Is this fine? Right. So, they can ask you causes of 1857 revolt. It is fine. And when you are discussing the causes of 1857 revolt, always remember that this revolt was the result of culmination of large scale discontent that has been accumulating for long time against the policies of the British. Right? So, whenever you are writing causes of this revolt of 1857, you have to talk about how British policies, adversely affected the interests of almost all sections of the society. All sections of society. Right? So, in your answer, you have to tell the examiner that how almost all sections of the society, their interest, adversely affected, they suffered, and they were waiting for an opportunity, and when the opportunity came, they joined. Right? So, when you are writing causes of 1857 revolt, you have to tell the examiner how British policies adversely affected the interest of almost all sections of the society. Now, in this context, you have to remember a very popular declaration during 1857 revolt. Initially, we had no idea about this original document of this declaration. It was in Urdu, it was later translated into English, and this document is the most important source to understand the causes of 1857 revolt. What all different sections demanded under this proclamation, and this proclamation is called Azamgarh Proclamation. Azamgarh, UP, Azamgarh Proclamation. Azamgarh Proclamation. Always remember it. Right, this you will not get in your old material. Right, all those new books, they are talking about this proclamation, and this proclamation was related to 25th August 1857, and this proclamation is the original document you have, and on that basis only you can understand that how different sections affected by the British policies, and they were ready to react. Is this fine? Will you remember this Azamgarh Proclamation? Right. So, when you are writing how different sections had grievance, how different sections were affected by, you will see the different, you can say the British policies, you will get the answer why this revolt. So, what would be your format? We can mention that how peasantry reacted, and why peasantry reacted, peasantry. So, we can always mention that on peasantry there was burden of excessive taxes. There was burden of excessive taxes. Right? Why? As most of the historians say, that the only interest of the company, the only interest of the company was the realization of realization of maximum revenue with minimum effort. So maximum revenue with minimum effort, that was the interest of the company, and they wanted to extract maximum. So on peasantry there was burden of excessive taxes, and therefore they wanted, or they reacted, right. So why 1857 revolt? Because the peasantry, right, they were not happy, and you have to add in peasantry that there was loss of their land, right. There was loss of their land to the money lenders, right. So excessive, you can say, tax, rent, right, and loss of their land to the money lenders. So their situation was very difficult, and peasants reacted. Fine. So how you are writing causes of 1857 revolt? By discussing the grievances of different section of society. Then we can add, after that we can add peasantry, and then we can add even, right, artisans, and craftsmen. They suffered during that British rule, colonial rule. Artisans and craftsmen, they suffered, right. Why they suffered? Because there was destruction of right, village or cottage industries, there was destruction of village industries, right. And why this destruction? You know this, because one way free trade policy, right, of the British. So because of this one way free trade policy of the British, artisans and craftsmen, they also suffered. There was destruction of their village industry, handicraft industry, and skilled people became what? Right, unemployed, without any work, without any scope, without any opportunity. So they also had grievance, right. So they started reacting. So I hope you are getting. You have to highlight grievance of different section. You will get the causes of revolt of 1857. Then third, we can add that how traditional jamindars were also not happy. Traditional jamindars were not happy. Why they were not happy? We can add that many of them, lost their jamindaris, right, to the new class, of urban based what we call absentee. They were absent in rural areas, they were urban based, absentee, right, landlords, right. So traditional jamindars, they lost because of those sunset laws and other laws, right. So they also, right, they were also not happy with the British rule, and when opportunity came, they reacted. Then we can add the next, right, that even middle class or the upper class, right, middle class or upper class they were also not happy with this, you can say, the British policies. Why? Because of total exclusion, because of their total exclusion, because of their total exclusion from those high post, total exclusion from high post, administrative or military posts. So they were also not happy, they were also not happy, right. So middle class, upper class, they can say they had some expectation, but they were also not happy. So they also started, you can say, thinking about what, right, you can say changing, or you can say expelling this British rule. Then what we should remember, and it is very important, the next point, that even the native rulers, right, they also had grievances. Native rulers, they also had grievances. Why they had grievances? Can you remember why they had grievances? Why these native rulers were also not happy? They were also waiting. Why? Why these native rulers were not happy? Because of those imperial policies of Wellesley and Dalhousie, right. So because of those policy, and particularly in after 1848, 1850s, policies of Dalhousie, Lord Dalhousie, right, Dalhousie prepared the background. They were not happy with this British rule. How you can mention, how you can elaborate it? So we can add why native rulers were also not happy with the British rule. We can add that Dalhousie's annexation of states, Dalhousie's annexation of the states, Dalhousie's annexation of states through his policy of doctrine of lapse, through his policy of doctrine of lapse, right. So you know that Satara, right, then Jaitpur, Sambhalpur, right, all those areas, smaller states, they were annexed under doctrine of lapse, right. They did not allow, you can say, the natural, you can say, adoption. So you will see that adoption was not allowed, and they started annexing. So doctrine of lapse created the background, and this kind of arrogant approach, violation of Indian tradition, imperialism, so annexation of states under doctrine of lapse, you will see that native states were not happy with this kind of policy. Fine. Then we can add that, you can say, Dalhousie's policy of annexation of Awadh, it was also reacted. Annexation of Awadh, right, annexation of Awadh on the ground of misrule, in 1856 was also an eye opener for the native rulers, right, for the native ruler, because Awadh always served them. So Dalhousie's policy actually, right, convinced native rulers what, right, that we should not trust these people, right. So annexation of Awadh also created background. Native rulers were not satisfied. Then we can add that Dalhousie abolished, right, the titles, right, titles of Nawab of Karnataka, and Raja of Tanjore. So see, he is abolishing titles. That also convinced native rulers that you are not safe under them. So Dalhousie's policy of doctrine of lapse, Dalhausie's policy of annexing Awadh on the ground of misrule, and Dalhausie's abolishing the titles of Nawab of Carnatic and Tanjore convinced native rulers, right, that this colonial rule is not, you can say, safe for them, right. And then we can also add that Dalhousie announced, he announced in 1849, he announced in 1849 that the successor of the Mughal Bahadur Shah Jafar, Bahadur Shah II, he announced in 1849 that the successor of Bahadur Shah II, successors of Bahadur Shah II would have to leave the Red Fort. They had to leave the Red Fort. Now you tell me, this kind of insulting behavior, right? So what he announced in 1849, that the successor of Bahadur Shah II would have to leave the Red Fort. Now this kind of insulting behavior, right, was not, right, accepted by the Indian states, native states. And not only they were insulting to the Mughal Nawab, they were also insulting to the Marathas. So we can also add that Dalhousie refused to grant the pension, Dalhousie refused to grant the pension to the adopted son of Marathas, to the adopted son of Marathas, right, adopted son of Marathas, right. So because of that also there was a reaction. So I hope things are clear now. Why 1857 revolt? I hope you are getting the structure. Why 1857 revolt? Grievances, culmination of large scale discontent, grievance, peasant, grievance, artisans, craftsmen, grievance of other section, upper section, right, then a grievance of native rulers. And Lord Dalhousie played important role in arousing consciousness among, you can say, these native rulers, right. So these grievances played important role. Then you will see that after this grievance, there was grievance of sepoys also. Sepoys also, they were also not happy. So Indian soldiers, we will call them sepoys, they were also not happy with this, you can say, British rule, and they were always reacting. There is a background, there is always they were reacting, but now their reaction was more. So sepoys were also not happy. So the next reason was grievance of sepoys. We can add that there was discrimination, right, in payment. There was discrimination in payment and promotion. Discrimination in payment and promotion. There was mistreatment, right, of sepoys by the British officials, right. They were not given allowance called bhatta, foreign allowance or other kind of allowance. They were not allowed bhatta or allowance, right. And there was always a threat, right, on their religion, right, always a threat. So because of that, there was always a dissatisfaction and they were always reacting. So there is a long history of sepoy reaction, right. As you can say, mentioned also that there was always a reaction, that in 1764 you will see the first reaction of the sepoys in Bengal, 1764. Then in 1806, very important reaction. In South, Sepoy reaction, it is called Vellore mutiny, Vellore mutiny, Vellore mutiny. Remember this for your examination, it can be asked in preliminary. 1806, Sepoy mutiny in South India, Vellore mutiny, Vellore mutiny. Then you will see that there was in 1824, there was a mutiny, Sepoy mutiny in Barakpur, right. So you will see that there is a long background. So they were not happy with the British rule, and all these mutinies right continued, and now right they were not ready to tolerate, because they realized that they have no prospect, right. Professional discontent was there, and now then there was some religious discontent was also there, right. Then Sepoy grievances, I hope you will remember, and then there was grievance, you can say the grievances of orthodox and the conservative, you can say, people also. So we can also add that grievances of orthodox and conservative people, So when you are writing the causes of 1857 revolt, you have to talk about these grievances. Why these grievance of orthodox and conservative people? Because they had the threat from, you can say, the Christian missionaries. So we can add that they had fear from the, because of the activities of the Christian missionaries, right. There was some resentment among them, against the social reform introduced by the government, abolition of sati, legalization of widow remarriage. So there was some resentment, right. Then there was some resentment because of a spread of English education, modern education, right. There was some resentment because of some interference in Indian practices, right. So these resentment also played important role, and these orthodox and conservative element also, they participated in this reaction. Idea is very simple. Idea is you have to highlight dissatisfaction of different section of the society. You have to suggest how British rule adversely affected the interest of different, almost all sections of the society. Fine. Then we can add that there was some basic, next important cause, there was some basic foreignness, there was some basic foreignness, right, about this British rule, basic foreignness about this British rule. They fundamentally differed, from other foreign conquerors. Why? Because they never made India as their home, right. Because they never made India as their home, right. They were always interested in pumping, you can say, money to England, right, drain. Their behavior was also, right, that they are superior, their administration, their law, of course, foreign. So you will see that there was some basic foreignness about this, right. You can say the British rule, and Indians reacted against this basic foreignness, right. Is this fine? Are you getting my point? Then right, we can always remember that there was some what you call psychological cause also, related to the revolt of 1857, right, revolt of 1857. What was the psychological cause? because we were tolerating them. But when there was some incident, if you can remember, some incident like the first Afghan war, right, like the Anglo-Sikh war, right, first Afghan war, Anglo-Sikh war, like you can say the Santhal war, it also motivated us. How? How they played important role in the cause of revolt of 1857? Because in first Afghan war, Afghanis, right, they challenged them, and Afghan war was a disaster for them. Anglo-Sikh war, Sikh challenged them, Santhal challenged them, created problem for them. They had to use military to suppress this revolt, right. So that gave us confidence that they are not superior militarily also, we can challenge them. So psychologically also you will see that we were prepared and we started reacting. I hope you are getting it. So all these causes prepared the background, right, all those grievances, basic foreignness, psychological factor, right, grievances, all kind of grievances, economic, socio-cultural, political, all kind of grievances. And then there was immediate cause. So we can then add immediate cause of this revolt. Immediate cause of this revolt. What was the immediate cause of this revolt? We can add introduction of the new infield rifle. Introduction of new infield rifle with greased cartridge, CARTRIDGE, right, cartridge, with greased cartridge whose end had to be beaten off, beaten off, BITTEN, beaten off, before loading it into the rifle. So introduction of the new infield rifle with greased cartridge, right, that was the immediate context, that sparked off the revolt, that was the immediate you can say context. And because of this, right, dissatisfaction, most of the, you can say, the sepoys refused to use this because there was a threat, there was a fear, there was a rumor that it included what? Fat of cow or pig, so that will disturb their religion, their culture. So that kind of rumor played important role. And but most of the present historian, they say that it was not rumor, it was correct, right. So anyhow, so this kind of, right, background prepared the, you can say, that this kind of issue prepared the background, and as a result you will see that mutiny started, and on 29th March, right, 1857, 29th March 1857, right, a sepoy of the 34th Native Infantry is stationed at Barakpur, right. His name was Mangal Pandey, right. He refused, right, he refused to use this, right, infield rifle, and he, right, you can say, started firing, and he severely wounded his officer, right, and he was arrested. So Lieutenant Bagh, right? He severely wounded and he was arrested. And when he was arrested, so there was again a dissatisfaction among, you can say, the Indian sepoys, and after that you will see Meerut, and after Meerut you will see Delhi. So this was the beginning of, right, what you call sepoy mutiny, right, what you call revolt of 1857. It is fine. So I hope now you are getting the idea that why revolt of 1857. When you are writing about the grievances. You are writing, right, about, you can say, all the different kind of grievance: military grievance, social grievance, economic grievance, cultural grievance, political grievance, right. You can highlight, you can say, the problems or the grievance of different section, and then, right, you will see the immediate context, and that led to the, you can say, the revolt of 1857. But what we have to remember, that this revolt, right, was suppressed. This revolt was suppressed, right. So here we can add, this revolt was suppressed, suppression of this revolt. This revolt started, but this revolt was suppressed, right. How it was suppressed? Here you can remember some important fact. Suppression of the revolt. Suppression of the revolt. You can remember some fact like Lord Canning right, took immediate steps, collected forces from different area, and he started marching towards Delhi, and this force started marching towards Delhi, right. So suppression started, and in Delhi, John Nicholson played important role. In Delhi, John Nicholson played important role, right. Then Lieutenant Hodgson arrested Bahadur Shah Zafar at Humayun's tomb. Right, Hodgson. Then in Kanpur and Lucknow area, Sir Colin Campbell played important role. Then in Jhansi, right, and Gwalior area, who played important role in suppressing this revolt? Sir Hugh Rose. So you can avoid this word sir, right. So Hugh Rose played important role in suppressing, you can say, Jhansi and Gwalior area, and he made a very important comment about Rani Jhansi, right. She, can say, she was praised. Anyhow, Hugh Rose. Then we can add that in Bareilly also, Campbell played important role. In Bareilly area also, Campbell played important role. And in the Banaras and Allahabad area, Allahabad area, Banaras and Allahabad area, right, General Neil, played important role. Banaras and Allahabad area. Fine. So at least these names you have to remember, they were suppressed, right. So this revolt started, but it was suppressed, and when it was suppressed, it is said that they failed, right? I told you how can we accept that it failed, but if they are asking reasons for failure, you have to write something. So why it failed? Why it failed? Why it failed? So why it failed, we can always mention, right, many factors contributed why it failed, right? Even you can also think of some factors why it was suppressed, that would be better, you can say, point. So we can add, right, why it failed, because some historians say that there was no forward looking program, no forward looking program, therefore it failed. No forward looking program. Then you know that many states, native states, they did not come, you can say, to help. They showed what? Complete loyalty to the British. Unfortunate, but they did this. So we can add that some rulers, like rulers of Patiala, rulers of Gwalior, Sindhyas, Gwalior, ruler of Hyderabad, right, ruler of Kashmir, ruler of Bhopal, these are very popular rulers, Nawab, Bhopal, right. They showed complete loyalty, therefore it failed, right. Then we can also mention that there was no cooperation from educated class, no educated class intelligentsia, no educated class, so no brain, right. So therefore it failed. Then some historian, they say that there was competent British generals, right, and we had some competent people, but they could not unite. So we can add lack of cooperation among Indian leaders, lack of unity or lack of cooperation. They could not coordinate. There was no coordination or cooperation. There was no cooperation or coordination among Indians, and therefore we suffered. They suppressed this revolt, right. Then we can also mention why they failed, because extreme localized nature of the uprising. So it is still starting from Meerut, going to Delhi, then Kanpur, then Lucknow. So they can suppressing here, 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 here. I hope you are getting it. So we can add that extreme localization, localized nature of uprising, also helped the British to tackle rebellions one at a time, right. So therefore, right, failed. Then some historian, they say that the date was initially fixed, but it started before that date. So that also was responsible. So we can add that this revolt started before the fixed date. And therefore it failed. So this was also one of the important factors. And then some historians say that by that time British, right, they were in a strong position. In world history, I would be explaining to you that British, they had many problems, right, in this period. Suppose one major challenge was Crimean War. But by that time there was end of Crimean War, and because of that, right, you will see that they get large number of forces from there. So therefore it also helped them. So we can add end of the Crimean War not in India, right, outside India. Crimean War, right, enabled them, right, to get large in reinforcements. So that also helped them, right. So these reasons, right, you can also think, right, about some reason. So these are some reasons because of that this revolt failed. But I always, right, believe that you should not use the term failure, right. And this was step, then second step, then third step. So it was not a failure. It had second the British rule, right, in India from its very foundation. It was a direct threat for the British Empire. After that, a new unity, a new consciousness among Indians, right. So this revolt, right, did not fail. It actually remained a source of inspiration. Is this fine? So I hope now you have idea about what? You have idea about causes of revolt of 1857, suppression of the revolt of 1857, and, right, causes of the failure of the revolt of 1857. But overall, you cannot understand, you cannot consider it as a failure. And when you will see the development after 1857, the kind of administrative changes they made in 1858, the kind of changes they made in military, the kind of changes they made in their social cultural policy, you will get this idea that this revolt was a game changer, right. This revolt was very important, right. Company's rule ended right after this revolt, and a new kind of administration. They realized the importance of good governance, right. But we will analyze what kind of good governance it was. 1858 Act, you will see that how they are changing their approach, right. So we cannot consider this revolt as a failure. Fine. So we will discuss some important leaders of this revolt and the nature of this revolt in a different video.